It's not 6.
Yeah.
It's not 6. Yes, that's how much she's on. Yes, sir.
Good evening. Good evening. Okay. The public forum on redistricting for single member District 2 is now called to order at 6:01 p.m. on Wednesday, March 9th, 2022, for the purposes stated in this notice for tonight's meetings. Board members present in the meeting are here is Trustee Kane. Thank you for coming out. And Trustee Pierce, who's joining us via Zoom. Do I have any other board members? No? Okay. Anyway, I wish to extend a warm welcome to everyone. Appreciate the interest and appreciate the work of the attorneys. Thank you so much. Our first order of business is a presentation by our legal and demographic team concerning what redistricting is, the role census data plays in redistricting, the system census data for 2010 and 2020, and the initial proposed maps. Ms. McBride and Mr. Gardner, you may begin your presentation.
Thank you so much, Trustee Murillo. If we can go to the next slide, please. And welcome to everyone who is in the audience and who is viewing us online. Today's presentation has several objectives. The main part of our presentation is to present to you some proposed maps that rebalance the single member district of Lone Star College. But before we get to those maps, we have some preliminary work to do together to kind of explain what the process is and how we got from where we are to the proposed maps. So first, we'll have a legal overview. We'll talk about the population change analysis and the law that requires us to look at population change, the Lone Star College System's consent decree and redistricting criteria, which place some boundaries on how we can redraw a map in response to population changes. Then we'll actually look at the proposed maps that are being presented tonight that respond to the proposed or respond to population changes, but are within the confines of the limitations of the consent decree and redistricting criteria. And then we'll end the evening talking about the timeline that has been adopted by the board to complete the redistricting process and the immediate next steps and how they impact you, the public. If we could go to the next slide. So we'll begin with our legal overview. Next slide. So first of all, so that we're all working with the same vocabulary, what is redistricting? Redistricting is the process every 10 years where a governmental entity takes a look at the changes in population that have occurred over the last decade and how they affect that governmental entity's elective units. Here at Lone Star College, those elective units are called single member districts. Trustees have to reside within a single member district in order to represent that single member district. Lone Star College currently is divided into 9 single member districts. So redistricting is simply the process of once we receive data every 10 years from the Census Bureau that tells us how population has changed across the system and within individual single member districts, how we respond on the basis of what we're statutorily required to do, and then some things that are within our discretion progression. So the slide that is on the screen now shows your current boundaries and your current 9 single member districts. And with redistricting, what we're trying to do is balance population. So in 2013, when this map was first drawn, each of the 9 single member districts had roughly equal population. And so you might be scratching your head at home thinking, well, some of these single member districts look larger than others. That's based on land size. So some single member districts are physically larger than others, but when we talk about substantially equal, we're really talking about the individuals within the boundaries of the single member districts. And for that, we look at total population. So we're looking at individuals that are both under 18, over 18, individuals who are citizens and individuals who are not. We're looking at total representation because we want people to be equally represented and have relatively an equal say in their representation. But since 2013, we've had some population shifts. And so the data that came out in 2021 after the census in 2020 now tells us where we have to make adjustments so that our single member districts can become, again, relatively equal population, not necessarily equal size, but equal population. Next slide. So your current trustees are listed on this slide, single member districts 1 through 9. You currently have a vacancy in single member district 7. There are 8 trustees identified on this slide, each of which live within the boundaries, the current boundaries of the single member district that they represent. Next slide, please. So the board has utilized a committee process to help with the redistricting project that we're talking about. And the committee is composed of 3 trustees. The chair of the committee is Trustee Sullivan, who is the trustee from District 8. And other members of the committee include Trustee Pierce, who is a trustee from this single member district number 2, and Trustee Murillo, who is the trustee from single member district 4, who welcomed everyone this evening. Thank you, Trustee Murillo. Go to the next slide. So why do we redistrict? We redistrict because state law, the education code, requires an entity like the Lone Star College system to rebalance its population if, when the census data is released, we notice that the differential between the most populous district and the least populous single member district is greater than 10%. Notice again, I didn't say largest and smallest. I said the difference between the most populous and the least populous. So we're going to use the total population figures from the census data for our jurisdiction and look at the most populous single member district and the least populous single member district. And if that differential is greater than 10%, we have to rebalance. And that means changing the shapes of our single member districts to exchange population to make sure our system is once again relatively equal across single member districts in terms of population. So that's the why. Next slide. So now we need to talk about the when, because obviously understanding the census data and responding to it by redrawing our single member district lines takes some time. State law says that we have to complete this process not later than the 90th day before the first regular trustee election at which this system can act on and recognize the census data. That's a lot of legalese, so let's unpack that information. Your next election here for the Lone Star College system is November of 2022. To be specific, November 8th of 2022. 90 days before that is August 10th of 2022. So that's your statutory deadline to complete the redistricting, 90 days before the first regular election at which you can act on this information. This information wasn't released in April of 2021. Like it was supposed to be because of COVID. It wasn't released in May of 2021. It wasn't released in June or July. It wasn't released until August of 2021. And so that's why November of 2022 is really the first election at which this system can act on that information. 90 days before that election is August 10th. But let's look at that date, that August 10th of 2022 date. The first day for a candidate to file for a place on the ballot who's interested in running running for election. It's going to be in mid to late July, and the last day to file is in mid-August. So if we wait until August 10th to complete the redistricting process, that means that folks that are filing towards that first date don't know the boundaries, the new boundaries within which they need to live within in order to be eligible to run for a place on the ballot and to run to serve the public at large. And so that's why this board has determined that even though it could wait until August 10th of 2022 to complete this process, it won't, to be fair to anyone seeking to run for elective office. They're going to complete this process by July. In fact, they're going to complete this process by the end of June, so that the process is done before that first day to file in late July. So that's the win. Go to the next slide, please. So how do we redistrict? Redistricting is done by shifting population between single member districts. And that's literally done by redrawing the lines, the boundaries between single member districts. And we do that with an eye towards leveling or balancing the total population between the single member districts and bringing that deviation back to 10% or under. That's how we do that. And the board adopted in December of 2021 a process and a timeline for completing this process or this project, including multiple opportunities for public input. So we had a public education forum, just generally talking about redistricting in February. We're doing single member district community meetings in each single member district to talk about this first round of proposed maps. The board will take all of that information in, as well as trustee input, and revise those maps to actually incorporate public input and trustee input and come up with amended additional maps. And we'll do another round of community meetings to seek additional input before the board makes a final selection of a map to represent the system for the next 10 years. We'll go to the next slide. So we've spent a lot of time already this evening really talking about what redistricting is. And all of my comments have really been based on what does the data say, because the data drives whether or not we've hit that trigger regarding the 10% differential. So let's talk about the data. The data comes from the census report that's released every 10 years. What does the census report? The census reports on total population and voting age population. And then based on survey data that's derived from census information over a 5-year period of time, we also have another measure, which is citizen voting age population. And if you'll go to the next slide, I've included some specific definitions of each one of those terms: total population, voting age population, citizen voting age population. You will notice that total population and voting age population are direct count numbers based on the information folks filled out on their census survey. So they're direct count numbers based on survey responses as of April 1 of 2020. Total population is all the persons residing within a particular jurisdiction on census day that have completed that survey information. And so that's everybody: under 18, over 18, citizen, not citizen. Voting age population, another direct count number, is the number of persons on April 1 of 2020 who were 18 years of age or older. That final number is not a direct count number. It is a number that is based on a number of records as well as survey data that's the best mathematical approximation of the relationship of citizen and voting age to total population. But it's the number of persons who are 18 years of age or older and who are also citizens within a jurisdiction. Again, that's not direct count, that's a mathematical approximation. But we use these 3 different numbers to tell us different things. The first question: are our single member districts well balanced, or equally balanced? As I indicated earlier, we use the total population number. But if we are examining whether or not the voting strength of the minority population within any single member district has been diluted as a result of changes in population over the decade, or as a result of a proposed map, we look at voting age population, but more specifically and more keyly, we look at citizen voting age population, because those two things are better approximation of people who actually exercise or who are eligible to exercise the right to vote in an election. So we look at VAP, as it's called for short, or CVAP as citizen voting age population is called for short, and the principal number is citizen voting age population. You'll go to the next slide. So not only does the state law require us to have equally balanced population, but also federal law. So let's unpack just a little bit why that is so important, and why we have this mathematical approximation for telling us whether or not our single member districts are well balanced. The difference between our most and least populous districts being 10% or under. That's the mathematical approximation for are we well balanced. Here's an example that kind of explains why we don't want underpopulated single member districts or overpopulated single member districts. Imagine a pie split in half. And on one side of the pie, you've got 2 people. And on the other side of the pie, you've got 1,000 people. And each side is able to elect a representative. Which side of the pie would you feel like you had greater voting strength? Probably if you were on the side of the pie with only 2 people on it, because it's relatively underpopulated, and the side of the pie that's got 1,000 people on it is relatively overpopulated. So a vote has a relatively less share than on the other side of the pie. None of Lone Star College System's single member districts have that much of a disparity, but that's what we're trying to avoid: overpopulated single member districts relative to the other single member districts and underpopulated districts. And in Texas, we have a specific mathematical formulation for telling us whether or not we have over and underpopulated single member districts, and that's that 10% rule. If you go to the next slide, please. So now I'm going to bring on our wonderful demographer, Rocky Gardner, to talk a little bit about the demographic change analysis. In redistricting, we always look back. We look at where we currently are in comparison to where we were the previous decade. And so whether or not we have to redistrict is based on whether over the decade we have a differential between our most populous and least populous single member district that's greater than 10%. So we not only want to know that number, yes, whether or not we have to redistrict, but we want to know college-wide, system-wide, and single member district specifically, what have been some of the demographic changes in total population, voting age population, and citizen voting age population, because that kind of tells us what we can do once we understand those changes and where specific populations are in order to bring ourselves back into balance. If you go to the next slide. And Rocky, I'll turn it over to you now to talk about the 2010 totals.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me okay? I guess that's
yes.
Awesome. So this first graph is just showing what the 2010 totals were. You saw the geography before, the breakdown of the boundaries. This is where we get that first part. The total population of Lone Star College was almost 1.8 million persons, but the district average would be right around 200,000, as you can see back in 2011, when this work was done. The differential was 7.3%. So that's definitely within the 10% that Lisa was referring to. Now we look at voting age population, and of course, the very important citizen voting age population. We can also see that District 4 is a district of opportunity with over 50% Hispanic. And then you see that Districts 2, District 3, and District 6 have a combined percent CVAP that is over 50% for the African American and Hispanic populations, making those districts of influence. And so we move from that, then we fast forward 10 years to 2020. Next slide. As you can see, and like everywhere in Houston, there was strong growth in the Lone Star College area, 2,262,909 persons. So that was a significant change. Our average has gone up by almost 50,000 persons per district. And we can see what happened here is District 4 has now become the smallest district with 202,000 persons. The largest district, District 1, almost 280,000 persons. That differential is now 38.2%. So you can see that with 38.2%, we're definitely outside that 10% range, and we're going to be redrawing single member districts. And we also are going to take a close look at the voting age population, and of course, the citizen voting age population, because as we draw these plans, we want to make sure that we don't cause any kind of retrogression or strong change in any particular district, because as you'll see, District 4 continues to be a strong district of opportunity with 56.7%. It's actually increased a little bit from 10 to 20, but we still have District 2 is over 50% when you combine the Hispanic and African-American population, as is District 3 and District 6. So we'll work tirelessly to also make sure we have no changes or no significant changes that cause these percentages to drop off. Next slide. This slide simply shows the change, the growth of almost 500,000 persons within Lone Star College. You begin to see some of the shifts. We saw a decline in the percentages of population. So keep in mind, it wasn't always a total decline. Although we did see a drop in a few districts, it's more or less where the share shifted. So from an easy one to look at, the citizen voting age population, you can see that the Anglo population share decreased in many districts, actually in every district, even though we saw growth in Anglo population in each one of these districts, with the exception of a few. And you can see here some strong change. Like we say, District 4 saw a 5% growth or change in their share. At 2 and 3, each saw strong change, as did District 7 in their share of population for Hispanic. Next slide, please. So now we can go in and look at District 2 specifically and see what happened in District 2. District 2 was 200,000 persons in 2010, grew to 254,000 persons by 2020. So the good news is that falls right within our threshold, right? You know, we were looking about 250,000. In a perfect world, we wouldn't have to change District 2. But you know, one thing when we looked at the original districts, if you see where we need growth and where we have the largest districts, they don't sit next to each other. So what happens is when we begin to do this, to adjust boundaries, we've got to shift from the highest populated areas down to a little bit lower populated areas, so we can populate. Basically, there's going to be a shift kind of from north to south, because the southern areas where we saw some of the smallest groups. But again, you can see the change here that the African-American percent went from 29.2% voting age population to over 35%, which their CVAP also saw that increase to 30.6. The Hispanic CVAP increased from 21.9 to 27.7. So District 2 is a strong district of influence with over 50, almost 58, over 58% combined influence there. Next slide, please. So just some key takeaways. The college added almost 500,000 persons from 2010 to 2020. We're now at 2,262,847 persons. Again, this differential exceeds 10%. We're sitting at 38.2%. The most populous SMD changed from District 9 to District 1. The least populous district, it remained District 4 in both 2010 and 2020. So redistricting is now required. I think we're going to jump right into our consent first. Go ahead, Lisa.
Okay, so just to recap, now we know what redistricting is, why we have to do it, and the timeline for doing it. We know, or we have reviewed some of the data that confirms that we in fact have to rebalance, because the differential between our most and least populous single member districts is greater than 10%. It's 38.2%. And so as now we rebalance and have to shift the boundaries between single member districts, what are some constraints on our thinking about how to redraw our current map? Well, we have two sets of constraints. We have a consent decree, which is essentially a court order that limits how we can reshape our map, as well as some map drawing principles known as redistricting criteria that have been adopted by the board, which are based on either statute or common law. Let's first take a look at the consent decree. So in 2013, the system was sued to go from an at-large system to a single member district system. And to resolve that lawsuit, the system agreed to go to a single member district system, and a consent judgment and decree was entered that had some stipulations regarding the way the single member districts that were drawn in 2013 had to be configured and continue to have to be configured unless changed by that court. So if you'll go to the next slide, those limitations are: one of the single member districts had to be greater than 50% Latino or Hispanic on the basis of citizen voting age population. And then two different single member districts had to be greater than 50% citizen voting age population when you combine the African American and Latino or Hispanic population. So that is single member district number 4 is the opportunity district on the basis of Hispanic population. And then actually you have 3 influence districts, single member districts 2, 3, and 6. So in thinking about how to rebalance the system, we have to maintain the opportunity district and the 3 influence districts. So those are some limitations. We can redraw lines so long as we maintain our opportunity districts and our 3 influence districts. So what are some other limitations or things that we have to consider with respect to redrawing the lines in order to rebalance population? Let's look at the redistricting criteria adopted by the board. And because we've talked about the law regarding redistricting, some of these criteria are going to look familiar to you because they're based on the law regarding equal population. The first criteria is to use easily identifiable geographic and political boundaries when possible, meaning the boundaries between single member districts are going to be based on geographic boundaries, freeways, highways, creeks, bayous, or political boundaries like an election precinct, because those are natural breaks between single member districts and kind of represent that we're keeping neighborhoods or communities together within one single member district, and we're not splitting them across single member districts. Criteria number 2 is going to seem very familiar. Single member districts, to the extent possible, are going to be of nearly equal population in terms of total population according to the 2020 census. And more specifically, single member criteria number 3 is that the deviation between the most and least populous single member districts is going to be at or within 10%. Single member districts shall be, looking at criteria number 4, compact and contiguous to the extent possible. And compact really looks at the shape of a single member district and examines whether or not it is physically compact in terms of, is it squared or curved, or are there long arms and legs going completely north and south of the system or east and west of the system. One of the things that causes those long branches to a single member district is if you're not attempting to keep communities and neighborhoods together. If you are, those single member districts tend to be more compact, more squared, more curved. So we're looking at a political compactness as well as a physical compactness when we're talking about the issue of compactness. And then contiguousness refers to the boundaries. Are there any breaks in your boundaries? And so if you can trace the outline of all of your single member district boundaries with a pencil without lifting that pencil up, that means your system is contiguous. Your 2013 system is contiguous, and that's being used as a baseline for all of the proposed maps, which means the proposed maps similarly are contiguous. Criteria number 5 says that the single member districts shall conserve incumbent constituency relations by placing current trustees within the new single member districts under the new maps. And this is a criteria that's permissible, as I indicated at the top of our time together. In order to serve a community within a single member district, a trustee must reside in that single member district. And so what this criteria says is, in the process of redrawing our maps, we won't draw a current trustee out of his or her single member district. You'll go to the next slide. Criteria number 6 says where possible, the proposed maps will maintain neighborhoods, communities of interest, and other political groupings within one single member districts. So we're going to try to avoid splitting neighborhoods and communities of interest to the extent possible. If we have to, though, in order to comply with the first rule, which is not going beyond the 10% deviation or having single member districts of equal population, we will do so because that's the preeminent or primary rule that we have to comply with. Number 7, to the extent possible, we're going to try to avoid splitting county election precincts to make us a better election partner with other entities that have elections on the same day we do. Again, this criteria is subordinate to the other criteria because if we have to split a county election precinct in order to comply with the 10% rule, in order to comply with our consent decree regarding opportunity and influence districts, or in order to have equal population across our system, then we'll have to split up a precinct. Number 8 is a more general statement of our obligations under the Voting Rights Act, which is not to allow the rebalancing of our single member district system to dilute the voting strength of any single member district where the minority population, singly or in combination, is greater than 50% of the citizen voting age population of that single member district. So for that, we use the previous numbers and we look at the CVAP, or the citizen voting age population, under the proposed map, and we see whether that CVAP is the same or stronger than under the benchmark or the prior plan. In Lone Star, you have a more specific requirement as a result of the consent decree that more specifically spells out that we have to maintain 1 opportunity district and 2 influence districts. And that is based on the law as it relates to the Voting Rights Act. So we have to comply with the Voting Rights Act generally, and then specifically with the derivative consent decree that's based on the Voting Rights Act that tells us specifically what some of our single member districts have to look like. And then the last criteria, because in redistricting, we don't fix what isn't broken, to the extent that our prior map was pre-cleared by a court, pre-cleared by the Department of Justice, we're not going to deviate from that prior map, but only make changes to it to the extent necessary to comply with the other 8 criteria that are on this list and the 3 criteria of our consent decree: opportunity district as well as 2 influence districts. So next coming up are the proposed maps. But for those of you who are viewing this presentation, as you are looking at the proposed maps, here are some questions you should ask yourself in evaluating whether these maps pass muster. The first question is, does the map bring the deviation between the most and least populous single member district back at 10% or under? If it does, passes, part 1 of the test. The next part of the test are the criteria from the consent decree. So does the proposed map maintain an opportunity district? In Lone Star, that's single member district 4. And does it maintain the influence district, single member districts 2, 3, and 6? Remembering that an opportunity district means that there is 1 minority group that by itself is greater than 50% citizen voting age population in a single member district. For single member district 4, that's the Hispanic population. An influence district just means combined 2 or more minority groups have influence in a single member district because they're either the greatest population in terms of citizen voting age population, or they're greater than 50% in terms of citizen voting age population. And in Lone Star, that single member districts 2, 3, and 6 on the basis of Hispanic and African-American population combined. So if you have a map that brings us back to 10% or under, 1 check mark. If it maintains the opportunity in 2 influence districts, another check mark. And then the last thing you're going to ask yourself is how well does the map comply with the redistricting principles adopted by the board, those 9 criteria that we went over. So those are the 3 questions to ask yourself: 10% rule, the 3 requirements of the consent decree in terms of our opportunity and influence districts, and the 9 map drawing principles adopted by the board. If a map satisfies those, or the map that satisfies those best is the map that best complies with both what the board has dictated it wants with respect to rebalancing its single member districts and the legal requirements as it relates to redistricting. So now we're going to present some proposed maps and look at them generally as they relate to the system as a whole, and then more specifically, how they impact single member district number 2. So Rocky, I'll allow you to present the proposed maps.
Thank you, Lisa. Before I get going too far into the maps, I want to explain a couple things of what you're going to be looking at. The outlines that you see in dark blue on each of these maps are the current single member districts. Where you see shading is where you see the plans that my colleague and I have worked up. Now, so when you see shading that kind of goes under, bleeds under some of the color, that means that that zone is going to go farther into a zone. So you may see, you know, where District 7 now has some purple that go into it, because that means District 5 is capturing some of District 7's population. And like I said, we had to move population a little bit from north to south. Just want to share that first. So this is the first plan. You can see some changes there between 5 and 7, 9 and 5. I think everybody gets touched in this plan a little bit, and that's what you're going to see going forward. You know, if we don't have to change a district, we won't. But in most cases, we're probably going to have to touch everyone at least a little bit. Next slide, please. So this is the first plan. The first thing you can look at is the criteria. Did we stay within the 10%? You can see here that now District 4 is still our smallest district, District 9 the largest, but that differential is 9% underneath the 10% differential. Again, these are draft maps that my colleague and I put together. We're trying to meet the minimum criteria. The goal is to create a couple plans that we could then take out and share with your trustees to let them then give us some feedback, because no one knows their area better than they do, but we had to have some good starting points. You can see here that District 2, the district that we're at today, still remains a strong district of influence with almost 60% total. District 3 is also over 50%, as is District 6. And then you can see District 4 continues to be an opportunity district with over 50% CVAP there of Hispanic. Next slide. Now, you can see with the black circles here, these are all the different areas where we made changes. Like I say, it doesn't appear anybody, you know, leaves unscathed from our review here. We've borrowed and moved populations from just about from every single member district. Now I think we're going to zoom in on District 2. So in District 2, just to kind of give you a little bit of perspective, this is an area of District 2 that we moved into District 6. Again, we're moving populations to both increase the district, but also make sure that District 6 remains an influence district. This is Kukendall Road here, where we made the split. It includes, you know, a little bit of Cypress Wood Road, and I think Airline is it Stubner Airline Road. So a little bit there in 6. That's 2 going into 6. Slide. Now this is an area then, because we moved population out of 2, we had to make sure it didn't get too small. So we used in this plan, it's Lake Houston Parkway, and I think this is called Will Clayton up here above. So we went out, we grabbed a couple neighborhoods. We didn't split neighborhoods if we didn't have to, but we did grab a couple neighborhoods, and we moved population from 8 into 2 in this scenario. I think those are the only 2 changes in Plan 1 and District 2. So we gained population from SMD 8, and we lost population to SMD 6 in the west. That's Plan 1. Plan 2, you can see again, we can see it's different. You can see, you know, some of the stuff that you might have seen bleeding through before is a little bit different. It's just a different angle at going at reaching the same goal. Next slide. And as you can see, very similar to District 4, once again, the smallest district. In this case, District 2, we added enough population to District 2 that it now becomes the largest district with 262,000 persons, 9.2%. So just a little bit tighter, but still within the 10% differential. If we look at our District 2 district of influence, we're still sitting around 59% there. So well over 50%. District 3 and District 6 also stayed over 50%. And finally, District 4, our opportunity district, is also over 50% with 52.3% deviation. Now we can look at, you can see the black circles here. Again, we see just a little bit. This is a little bit different. This time, District 7 is getting population from District 5, while it's seeding population to District 8. So you can just see where you begin to see some subtle differences. And we zoom into 2, you can see there's a little more movement now in 2. Very similar, if we go to the next slide. This on the south at Green Road, we moved some of District 2 into District 4, which we know needed strong population. And then this is a pretty good Hispanic area here. The next move. This again, we went a little bit past the Lake Houston Parkway this time. We used Will Clayton, but we went all the way to the lake. Captured quite a bit of population there. And this, so District 2 gains population from 8, loses population to 8. So there was a kind of shift there. In that case, we lost some population to District 6, and we lose some population to District 4, while still maintaining, we see the losses, but keep in mind, District 2 still remained the largest district. So if we compare the maps, this is a good slide to compare the maps. In District 2, so you can see we started with 253,000 in Plan 1. We increased to about 256,000, and by Plan 2, 262,000 persons in Plan 2. Your voting age population and your Hispanic voting age population both stayed. Their percentages remained high, actually very flat across the board there, and again, very similar in percentages. So it just shows how you can change geography around a little bit and still keep very similar percentages. Questions with that?
So now that we've gone over the proposed maps and sort of the preliminary information of how we got from 2013 to today, I think this is a good point, with your permission, Trustee Murillo, to entertain any questions from audience or trustees.
Thank you. We will now open the floor for questions or comments from the public. If you're physically present, please come to the microphone and speak. Or if you're online, please use the action icons in Zoom. Do we have anyone? No. Okay, thank you so much. Ms. McBride, will you present the timeline and next steps?
Yes, sir. So you will see on the screen the board adopted timeline, and we are in between the February 9th special board meeting on redistricting, where the board actually considered or reviewed the 2 proposed maps that were now going out to the community in all of our single member districts in order to receive input. So we're between that February 9th meeting and the March 24th meeting, which is the meeting of the Redistricting Committee 2022. March 24th of 2022. At that meeting, the Redistricting Committee is going to take all the feedback from the public that we've been receiving in these community meetings, as well as from the board, and proposed additional or amended maps that take that feedback into account. And on April 13th, at a special board meeting on redistricting, the full board will take consideration of the recommendations of the Redistricting Committee and come up with another set of maps that reflects the work of the Redistricting Committee, the input from the public from the various community meetings, as well as any public comments that are made online on the redistricting website, and trustee comments. At that meeting, the board will approve a set of maps to go back out to the public to receive additional public input on those maps. If we'll go to the next slide, you'll see that there is another Redistricting Committee meeting on April 21st, where the Redistricting Committee considers the public comment on the revised map, and the board considers the Redistricting Committee's recommendations on May 11th. And on June 8th, we have a public centralized hearing on 1 to 2 maps that the board and redistricting committee have narrowed things down to based on public and trustee input. June 16th, we have one final redistricting committee meeting in order for the committee to make any final tweaks based on any additional input, either from the trustees or from the public, either at community forums or via the ability to provide comments online on the redistricting website. And finally, the last meeting, June 29th of 2022, will be a special full board meeting to adopt the final map. And you will see that our timeline ends at the end of June, which means that we complete this process before the first day for a candidate to file for a place on the ballot for the November 22 election. You'll go to the next slide, please. So the immediate next steps is we continue to update our website with initial maps and receive public comments. And then we will finalize all of our SMD community meetings before we have our next redistricting committee meeting. If you will go to the next slide. So this round 1 of community meetings, we have them all listed on this slide. We are at the March 9th District 2 Community Forum. We have additional community forums on March 21st for District 5, March 23rd for District 9, March 28th for District 1, March 30th for District 6, April 4th for District 5, and April 6th for District 8. That's round 1 on these initial maps. Then when the board and committee meet again to take in all that public input and propose revised maps based on that, we'll go out for another round of community input sessions. And again, go through all of our single member districts. And those dates are between April 18th of 2022, ending on May 3rd of 2022. Specific date for your SMD is included on this chart. And for single member district 2, that's April 21st of 2022. If you'll go to the next slide. I've mentioned a couple of times during the presentation tonight about Lone Star College System's redistricting website. That website is kept up to date with presentations that are made to the board, that are made to the redistricting committee, and our community forum presentations, as well as the process and timeline adopted by the board. We have a snippet of the webpage included in our materials here, but the actual address to that website site, the specific site, is www.lonestar.edu/redistricting. So please keep that in mind if you want more information about the process when an upcoming community meeting in your area is coming up, or about a redistricting committee or a board meeting on redistricting. And with that, Trustee Murillo, that concludes our presentation.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And as we come to a close, I just cannot emphasize enough the importance of keeping up via the website. I think clearly there's opportunities beyond this for the public to provide input. Questions that may come up after today or later. If they're not clear, the public people from the public are not clear on some things. This is a place to check to see what to do next. I appreciate the fact that you kept us on track. I think that's critical to make sure we meet those deadlines. So you've done a great job. But just because someone wasn't able to attend today or other meetings doesn't mean they can't provide input, right? So and if we'll stop time for folks for public to check up on things and to find out what to do next. So just wanted to emphasize that as you did. And that's it. With no further business to discuss, this public forum is now adjourned at 6:47 p.m. The next, on March 9th, 2022, next special board meeting on redistricting is on April 13, 2022, and the redistricting committee will hold a meeting on March 24th, 2022. Thank you.